Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Haven't been making videos for a couple weeks, so I want to kind of get back into the swing of things. I had some real life events going on and kind of got me out of my routine. So I had this topic rolling around in my head. I had a few topics actually, but I want to talk today about internally and externally reinforced behaviors that we would display in game as players. Not so much as, well, maybe as game masters too. But what I mean by that is, a lot of games have come around that do a really good job at reinforcing or codifying certain behaviors or best practices that a lot of us just kind of did naturally, back in the day. And a lot has been written about this. So I'm not going to go too much into it, but the idea that there are certain practices that worked really well to create certain feels, and so why not make them a codified part of the game? And what I found with these as I'm exploring these various games is sometimes, depending on the game, or probably depending upon the intentions of the people playing it or explaining it, sometimes they can feel a little bit artificial. Now, this is not a video saying that these things are bad. This is just kind of my impressions or my reactions to some of these concepts or ideas, and how sometimes they get implemented. And so I'm going to be a little bit vague because I'm not picking on various games, and I'm really interested to try some of these games, and I'm in the process of trying some of these games that do more of this. But I'm talking about things like instead of, like, say, giving experience points or any kind of character advancement via the old mainstays of, like, killing monsters and gaining treasure, all those things that were reinforced in, like, say, early Dungeons and Dragons, or whatever. Looking at ways to reinforce behaviors such as, like, playing up a motivation, or playing up to a flaw, or playing with playing to your character's beliefs, or creating beliefs for your characters. All the various other parts of what goes into role playing. And it's funny because as I'm looking at some of these dynamics and some of these practices, these are things that are actually written into the rules. Now you're going to say maybe get advancement for having beliefs and then testing those beliefs. Things like Burning Wheel actually has a whole big giant list of all that kind of stuff, which is a lot of what I've been reading about, and other games as well. But that probably has some of the biggest amount of stuff that's on the internet and elsewhere and in the game about it. By having that written in the rules, it reinforces those kind of behaviors. And I was thinking about it. First off, these are things that, like I said in the beginning, these are things that some of us just kind of naturally did. And so I guess the point of this video is, like, how are you getting reinforced for these behaviors? Are you being reinforced on an external basis or an internal basis? And as I've approached gameplay over the years and figured out kind of what my style is, regardless of whether or not the game or the system reinforced a certain behavior, I tended to do it because it was internally reinforcing. I tended to play my character like he was real because it was internally reinforcing. I liked doing that. In the just to take an example, the Lamentations in Prussia game that I'm playing right now, or running right now, the three players they have motivations, they have goals, they have very distinct personalities. There's things they do that have nothing to do with what's actually in the setting, or any external goals or things that would be externally reinforced by the XP system of that game. And they're building up, they're making their characters real. They're inhabiting their characters. And they're doing these things despite the fact that none of this is actually reinforced by the game in any way mechanically. It's not in the game. There's no place in the text where you can find that. But they're doing it, I presume, based upon our conversations, because they find that internally reinforcing. They like doing that. That's how they like to roleplay. And I find myself doing the same sort of things in games. And there's nothing wrong, don't take this video the wrong way, there's nothing wrong with having these things codified in the game. But sometimes, what I see, and especially what I see in some of the discussions, and I'm not picking on any games, but I've looked at some wikis and some forums and various discussions about all these different types of mechanics or externally reinforced behaviors that these games insert, is sometimes what it ends up being is that you realize, I want this cookie. Okay, they tell me I have to jump through this hoop to get this cookie. So let's talk about the best way and the most effective way and efficient way to jump through those hoops in order to get what I want, which might be character advancement. Let's figure out what this game wants us to do, and then let's do that specifically because the goal is on the other side. I want, the game is externally reinforcing those kind of behaviors. And, I've had people say to me that in general, people won't do or engage in behaviors that the game doesn't reinforce. Non-reinforced behaviors tend not to happen. And I guess it depends on who you are and what your intentions are for the role-playing game experience. For me, my personal experience with that has been contradictory to that statement. I found that people tend to engage in the kind of behaviors that they find internally reinforcing, at least the kind of players that I gravitate towards. So maybe that's just, the culture of play that I gravitate towards. And to me, sometimes what happens is, I especially read some of the comments or talk to certain people, it feels very contrived and very artificial. All of a sudden, you're working on role-playing your characters' motivations or their flaws or their beliefs because that's what the game wants you to do. And in order to be successful at this game, you need to engage in those behaviors, if that makes any sense to you. So that was just kind of my thoughts. I wanted to hear your opinions on that. And like I said in the beginning, and probably said 3 or 4 times, I'm not saying that my way is good or the way I approach these things and internal motivation is good and external motivation is bad. I've just found any kind of role-playing game experience to be much more profound, much more natural to me if my rewards are internal. I'm engaging in these particular behaviors because I like to engage in them, if that makes any sense to you. And I know it's important for the game to have a kind of external reward structure as well, and that helps to promote the kind of experience that the game designer was going for. But to me, I think at the end of the day, regardless of the whether or not those external motivators are available or not, or present or not, the game is much more natural, real, satisfying if my main reward for engaging in whatever the kind of behaviors are is internal. What do you think about all that?